Greetings, Kerbonauts. This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 34 of Project Odyssey, in which, a whole lot of things to do again. We have our Juul mission. We have our life support transfer from the previous episode we're watching right now. We had sent that ATV-type craft up to the Odyssey station, and once it has transferred over everything that we need on the station, we can send that back to be destroyed. Let's see, what else do we have coming up? We need to work on our moon base. We need to attach more living space to Odyssey Station. We need to get Svetlana over to the moon base so she can finish the construction that needs to be done by hand. We should probably check in with the alternate dimension to see how they're doing. And in particular, check to see how Bill is faring after being threatened with the application of some sort of strange creature from another world. And if all that isn't enough, then perhaps we will check in with the satellite that's on its way to Eve, the one that's going to go and investigate the anomalies. You can still see the effects in the atmosphere down below, all those flashes coming from the strange plasma surges in our atmosphere from all those anomalies that might be originating from Eve for an unknown reason. Next up, as you surely recall from the last episode, we had a slight incident with our landing zone. Okay, I admit it, this isn't exactly what I was trying to do, but we can solve this. I'm going to reduce the thrust level on the back engine so that if I throttle up, then those won't fire as much, and that way the front ones will fire, which will lift the nose of the craft, and that will cause it to go backward as well. And then if I just throttle up enough, it'll slide itself backward off of the other lander. And now it looks like nothing ever happened at all. It's as if this is exactly where I wanted it to be. Now we can bring out our secondary deployment rover before this new lander lowers its legs, because that's what has to happen for all of those habitation modules to come out. It's a good thing that I brought this secondary lander too, because I need to go and fix a couple problems. Problem number one is that the other deployment rover, the little headpiece that you can see on the front of this one, well, it just plain disappeared off of the other one. It's most likely some kind of strange bug related to having left that detached the last time that I was using it. So I will be smarter at thinking that that might be the problem. And when I'm done with this deployment rover, I'm going to pull that headpiece back up into the winch and lock it in place. And then we will leave this site. Problem number two is that when I was coming in for a landing originally with the new luxury lander, as soon as everything went off rails and came into focus, all the payloads, to some degree or another, jumped up in the air as if a force had been applied to them, and some of them came back down right away, and others went up a little bit further, I guess based on the mass on them or something, and they did a little bit of a spin. And so when two of the payloads out here came down, they were actually on their sides. So off screen and a little bit of on-screen, I have used the new deployment rover to reposition those, to right them into their correct orientation again, and to get them moved into locations that will be a little bit more out of the way relative to the luxury lander, so that we can expand all those inflatable habitat modules. And that's what we're doing right here. Those inflatable modules come out of the MKS habitat. I guess I want to call it a mod, but it's almost not a mod. It's more like a whole little mini game construction set thing. Now, that said, I'm not using them for any of their actual MKS duties. I'm using the models, the artwork, the textures, but the part files are now pretty much all mine. Here are a couple really nice looks at the base before we finish with this for the moment. They sure are pretty parts, but I think they add too many new resources. I don't really want to do a whole bunch of bookkeeping in order to play, so I stripped their functions. For the luxury lander, I have a few things that I want to show. We're going to start at the bottom. underneath all of these little launch clamps holding the engines right there, we have 2 solids and 5 regular engines. In fact, it's a little hard to see this right now, so I'm going to scroll that up a bit. So you can see I have 5 engines right there. Well, using a strategy that comes straight out of the playbook of the Apollo program, the Saturn V, the middle engine is on a custom hotkey to shut it down so that as we're going up, I can go full throttle until such point as I decide I have a decent enough thrust to weight ratio that I'd be okay losing one engine. And then just like on the Saturn V, we'll shut it down. So I'll hit the 1 hotkey and this one will turn off. I've been doing that on all of my heavy lifters that have the 5 engines at the bottom. We have the Duna lander, the Harvester lander, we have the luxury lander right here. And we also have the Kerbin departure stage that goes up on a heavy lifter just like this. So I mentioned I have the solid boosters here. These are outfitted with 6 little ones. You can see them right there. There's 2 here, and 2 at the top that help push this out of the way. Also the bottom, this thing is so heavy even when it's dry that I have 10 little retro boosters down here on the bottom, as well as the 2 that are right up here on this side and over on this side, both pointing the same direction to have their thrust coming off toward the camera right here. That once this decouples right there, then it will get shoved away over in this direction like that. So you saw before this whole thing was taken apart just there a second ago, it starts with a really low thrust to weight of 1.32 because anything higher and it's just uncontrollable. It's too heavy. I need room to make my gravity turn, and that means I need to start with a really low thrust to weight ratio, otherwise it gets going too far too fast. That will go for a bit, and you can see that if I let it go all the way until those solids are depleted, then the thrust to weight will be 3.27. But since I'll be shutting down that middle engine, and the middle engine has slightly more thrust than the outer engines do, these are all set to 72, and the one in the middle is set to 100. So once I shut that middle one down, it will drop down a bit below the 3.72 point here. Also remember, these solid boosters on the side use a thrust curve. So MechJeb doesn't understand the thrust curve. It thinks that it's going to be at full thrust all the way until we make it to the decouple point. That is not the case. So this should be significantly less than 3.27 once we really decouple these. After that, we will have used up a bit of fuel in here. This will be a lot lower. And so with the 1 engine gone, we might see that the thrust to weight is somewhere around 1.43. It'll continue up as high as it can go on just those remaining 4 lower thrust engines. And then this will all come away, leaving us with our 1.57. So that's pretty decent on the second stage. Now, you'll notice that when I was way down there at the very bottom, if I kept scrolling up here, I'm in the rafters. So one of the things I was going to show you is I had to install the new mod that changes the size of the interior of the VAB. I just pressed the star on my number pad and a boom, look at that. Plenty of room now, and we can scroll up here and really see the top. Look how far up I can go. There's no way that I'm ever making a rocket that's this tall, so this is way more room than I'm ever going to need, so this is great. All right, back to the bottom. This is the same second stage that I've used a few times, operating off of UDMH and NTO, hydrazine in the side bottles here to control all of those RCS engines at the bottom. We got our communications and lights and all that there. The avionics ring is right there, and that's actually the root part. Setting a part in the middle of your craft that is your root part will help with the stability. I learned that little trick from the friend of mine who invited me to go see the Houston Space Center. So, pulling off the fairing and taking a look inside, it is the same basic layout of the Harvester lander, but instead of having all of those harvesting related things, we have living space on this one. There's living space over here, living space over here, living space over here. There's so much living space. That's why it's called the luxury lander. Outside of that, the structure is the exact same as I've shown before, with our fuel in there, engines, RCS, lights all around, drop tanks right here, and a cargo bay that contains an additional rover that we can use just in case we need one for assembly. If something were to go wrong with the first one, we'd have a backup. The tube down here on the bottom will be used to connect it to any other landers that we might have. Look at all that space, life support, everything you could ever want. Beautiful. When we're looking at the departure stage lifter, once again, it is too small in the VAB to fit that gigantic thing, so we'll expand the VAB and now we can take a good look at it. Look at the size of that fairing. That thing is gigantic. Look at that, 1,100 tons. The other one that it actually lifts starts off as 1,200 tons. I think the payload is 100 tons. Come to think of it, it might be like 140 tons. It was really, really big. So all of the bottom is exactly the same as it was on the other one. It was only the top part that I have changed. That's the departure stage right in there. So if we pull the bottom off, since that was the same as the other one that we've already looked at, we can scroll in and see that I've got my docking clamp right there that will attach it to the other one and make one nice, long, seamless craft. And then hiding up inside here, we have our hydrazine bottles all around the sides there, communications right there, battery and backup battery. So two or three of these are active and one of them is deactivated. That way, if I were to run out of power, I can reactivate it and use that. That might be just enough time to reorient the solar panels or something. Speaking of the solar panels, you can see it right there. That little teeny piece right there is the very beginning of one solar panel that's sort of buried right inside here. And when I activate that, let's see if I can click on it, it comes out like so. So you see, they stick out like that. But until then, they're protected in theoretically these little doors that would open and let the panels out, but protect them up until that point. Also in here, we got that antenna camera right there that I can use. Some extra pipes and lights all through there. The pipe endpoints are just in case I need to do something like refuel it or use it to refuel something else. Although the fuel that's in it is purely liquid hydrogen. 100,000 liters of liquid hydrogen, and that's it, because these engines up here operate off of liquid hydrogen. My customized Odyssey nuclear transfer engine. Far more efficient than the 800 ISP that's in KSP. I have these at a very high technology level of 1800 vacuum delta V, but because they only operate on liquid hydrogen, I need this very, very large fuel tank to contain all the fuel that I need in order to make transfers the distance of like to Duna or the moon. So just to quickly disassemble all the bits of it here, you can see I have this ring around the outside that protects the docking port and everything that's attached to the docking port right there. And then that ring was on there, which is actually just a squished down decoupler that has had the decoupling capability removed from it. Along the outside, we've got more lights, as well as a fuel tank. With an RCS engine there, the avionics are all right in here in the middle in a little ring, and above that we have another fuel tank that's the same as the one down here, so it has the embedded RCS jets on it as well. And then we have this structure to protect everything from the deadly radiation that will be coming out of these on the bottom. 3 of those, and that's it. Back around Kerbin, we hadn't deorbited our Medusa yet, so I'm going to do that now. And I'm also noticing that now that 0.90 is out and I'm still on 0.25, I get the lovely duty of dealing with the fact that all the mods think they want to upgrade, but they won't actually work on 0.25 if I install the 9.0 ones. So I can't do that, but they are going to continue flashing at me, like you can see on the right-hand side of the screen under the resource monitor. It wants to be upgraded to the latest version. I wish those mods would check to see what version you're on before they yell at you to upgrade to the latest one, because it's actually wrong. I can't switch, but now I have to look at that thing flashing all the time. Well, it seems so very long ago now that we originally launched the Juul mission to go and collect some of the atmosphere to bring back and use as the cure for Hadfield. I need to do a mid-course correction. We're almost there. So in this episode, we are going to watch as the Save Hadfield, the Juul Scoop, whatever name you want to call it, is finally going to make it there. The really tricky part about this mission is that after we've collected this gas with our little scooper, we need to return it directly back to Kerbin as fast as we possibly can. So that mid-course correction I did was to bring myself across the front of Juul, similar to how you would make your approach if you were doing a gravity assist maneuver in order to bleed off velocity. If I had come in from the backside, we would have increased velocity and probably been ejected from the solar system. Right here, we're close enough to see everything. If you look out there in that little window, Juul and the 4 moons are visible, orbiting rapidly as we come in from really far away, so we're pretty slow right now. It'll get quicker, of course. Juul's gravity is pulling us down. We're going faster and faster relative to Juul, although technically relative to the sun, we're going to be going slower, as odd as that may seem. With the protective radiation shielding open, we can now extend that arm and then activate the container that's going to scoop up that atmosphere. We'll also shift ourselves over to make sure that we're pointing in the direction that the burn we're going to make needs to be. When we get to Juul, we're going to use its gravity to continue reducing our speed relative to the sun so that when we come out the other side, we'll be dropping back down into the same orbit as Kerbin. We're getting a really good look at Lathe there crossing across the front of Juul as we make our approach. And if you look just to the left of Juul, we're able to see the moon of Val as well. And passing right over our satellite on the right side right there, that would be the moon of Tylo. We won't be passing through any of the spheres of influence of any of the moons on the way in or out though. If we had, I might have tried to use some of their gravity to get a little extra boost, but I think with the fuel that we have on board, we should be good to be able to make it back to Kerbin without doing any sort of extra tricky maneuvers. Our speed is picking up considerably here. Pretty soon we'll be going through the dark side of communications on Juul. We have stayed in communications with that gigantic dish right there up until this point. However, as we go around the back side, we will lose direct line of sight with Kerbin. So for the first time ever, I'm going to have to use the remote tech flight computer to do my maneuver. I have pre-set up a maneuver node, and hopefully this flight computer is going to take care of that for me because I won't have any manual control as we go around that dark side. I guess this won't be unlike some real missions, many real missions actually, where the payloads, the satellites, landers, whatever they might be, wherever they might be going, sometimes we don't have communication with them while they're in these critical phases. Like in this case, we're going to be making that periapsis burn around Juul to head back to Kerbin. Although unlike the real missions, I'll still be able to watch because we do have it on our screen. I won't be able to interact, but we'll be able to see it, and that is far more than what real scientists get when their payloads are reaching someplace, like if it's going to Mars, the Curiosity rover landing, those 7 minutes of terror. Also in real life, there's a time delay, but I don't have a time delay on mine. And here it goes. The flight computer has activated the engine. We are currently in our maneuver. We're skimming through the top of the atmosphere, grabbing some of that. And I can see a definite instability in our flight. I see the RCS jets are firing and it's trying to hold itself in the right angle. And to simulate that sort of 7 minutes of terror, we're going to come back to this later.
This is Surrogate Raptor 1, come in. We read you. I'm on the ground. It's just as deserted as it appeared from orbit. There's no one here. I'm heading over to their main R&D building now. Did you copy the directions we got from Bill into my pad?
We did. You're good to go.
Going in. This is Surrogate Raptor 1. I found the first piece. It was right where he said it would be. I guess the Kintari slugs work on their people as easily as on ours. Hey, I'm seeing strange atmospheric anomalies here. Yeah, we see them too. We're analyzing them now. We'll keep you updated. I'm heading over to the second R&D building right now. I'll take a look for that second piece.
And we're back at Juul, and even though we as viewers can see what's going on, those back at Kerbin have no idea because they've lost communication as this has gone to the dark side. The only reason why it's using its engine right now is we had previously set up that remote tech flight computer maneuver. And hopefully it was the right maneuver because we had no control over that as it was going through the atmosphere there, skimming through and picking up a little bit of that medicine that we're going to need to cure Hadfield. When the engine cut out, we went into a little bit of a spin, but hopefully we can recover that. As soon as we have communication again, we'll send the signal for it to stop spinning so that we can orient ourselves correctly in case we need to do any additional burns to get us back into a Kerbin intercept. We need to zoom out to the map and then scroll in close to Kerbin, see whether we got it, see how close it is if we did, and it looks like we did get it. Nice! Thank you, remote tech flight computer. We're really close right there. I might want to adjust how close we're getting so that it will be easier to recover. We don't have the Delta V necessary to recapture at Kerbin. The whole plan here was for a ship to be launched from Kerbin and go up and grab this. There's a docking port on this, and we'll go up and we'll grab it and bring it home that way when the time comes. Ooh, excellent. It looks like we have our communications back. We can stop that spin and bring in the payload, lock it up inside that radiation protective vault to make sure nothing happens to it on its journey home. And then we can try to adjust our trajectory with the little bit of Delta V that we still have left in this thing, bring ourselves down closer to Kerbin, hopefully maybe bring it down so that we're right along the equator. That'll make it so much easier to go out and recover this if when we launch, we can launch pretty much any time we want. We don't have to worry about an inclined orbit. So my first thought there was, oh cool, look, I have a moon intercept. I wonder if that'll be useful at all. And then I thought, well, I can't really think of a way. So then I figured not to worry about it. I would just try to adjust my trajectory to be as close to Kerbin as I possibly could. But then I had a second thought about that as well, because I may want a little maneuvering room to go from a parking orbit up to intercept that payload once it comes home. So ultimately, I changed my mind a couple times on what I was going to do with that trajectory, but ended up leaving it at about 1,300 kilometers away from Kerbin's atmosphere. That should give me plenty of room to go up into a parking orbit and then transfer over for an intercept later. And coincidentally, I still had the moon intercept even though I wasn't trying, so if I come up with an idea later of why I might want to have that, I have that option too. Right here, I just wanted to watch Odyssey station at high warp to make sure that the life support systems were working properly again. Speaking of life support, it occurs to me that we need to land some additional supplies on the moon because right now we have all the storage space for supplies to stay there, but we don't have the supplies themselves. And then I thought this would be a really good opportunity to go a little bit deeper into how I'm doing my life support systems. I made this chart to show how everything fit together, but this isn't how it started. It started in a spreadsheet. I have begun work on this new lander right here, and throughout the next demonstration of how the life support systems work, I will be showing little images of the parts on this lander so that you can get an idea of what they are and what they're supposed to do to provide my life support. We'll just start over here. You can see this is the in resources and out resources. Kerbals need a certain number of units per day, and that's shown here. So the units per second is here, and the units in this case is liters except for charge. So instead of saying liters, I said units because charge was different. So they use a certain amount per second of food, water, and oxygen, and that all operates through the TAC life support system. These are not the normal values that come from TAC. I rebalanced them more in line with to what I feel like they should be to simulate that they're really sturdy, like a human's level of sturdiness. So I gave them the same food requirements per day, same water, oxygen, everything's the same as humans. That serves two purposes. One, it actually makes the game a little harder. Maybe that's three purposes. But it also means that I don't have to do a bunch of converting to get into Kerbal scale. I can just take numbers right from NASA and say this is how much it should be. Also, the TAC water requirement is way lower than what it should be for long-term stay. The TAC one is just for like a daily, I'm in a capsule for 3 days kind of thing. It should be much higher like this right here if you're going to have any extended stays. And since TAC doesn't support the difference between days or months or years of life support, I went for the years of life support. So if we were going to be on another planet for a couple years, we would need to have 28 kilograms of water per day. That covers drinking, washing, mixing with food, doing laundry, you name it, it covers it all. From that input, we get these outputs. They get waste, not water. The little thing there means not. I think you can guess what that probably means, but it also includes other things like the dishwater or the laundry water. And of course, there's CO2. So all of this stuff goes in. Now we'll look down here and we can see that this is all lined up. A Kerbal uses this amount of food, this amount of waste. These represent the inputs, the storage that we need to bring with us. This is the outputs. The orange ones represent intermediate resources. So there we have the Kerbal's need per day right there. We don't want to have to bring all of that water and all of that oxygen. So what we'll do is we'll make it there. We will recycle our water and we'll make our own oxygen. So we're going to look right here. Notice that we can make exactly what it takes for the Kerbals to breathe. We can make that using a water splitter. So that brings us over to here where we have a water splitter. The water splitter is quite simple. Here is a molecule of water, H2O, H2O. So we have two of those. And when we split those, the oxygens come together over here and form a new oxygen molecule. And then the hydrogens split off and become hydrogen molecules. So we've separated them out. And now we have breathable oxygen. Green represents input, purple is output resources, and then the teal and orange represent the type of resource like I had over here. So it takes in water, takes in charge, it puts out oxygen and hydrogen. All in all, we have per second per day, the number of grams per liter of that resource, grams per second, grams per day. All of this should add up to 0 if I've done my math correctly, and you can see that it does. So that takes care of us right here. We've generated enough oxygen now that we don't need to bring any, but we used even more water. So right here, the water requirement has gone up. So this subtotal line here shows what the Kerbal uses, including the water, but now the oxygen's not on the line, although we do need a hydrogen tank in order to store that temporarily. Next up, we're going to work on the purifier to get our water recycled, and that is right here. So it takes in wastewater and electrical charge. It generates regular water and some waste. The totals once again come out to 0. We put that info on this line, and the subtotal comes out now with these two adding up to 0. So we no longer have wastewater, and our water requirement has gone down considerably. Our waste is going to keep going up every time though, and down here at the bottom you're going to see that we'll actually have a bunch of waste that we need to take care of at the end of the mission, somehow dispose of it. Next up, we need to get that CO2 out of the air. So we go over here to the Sabatier. The CO2 is going to be mixed with some of that hydrogen that we had left over from before. Run a little extra charge in there to power this thing, and it is going to drip out some regular clean water that we can drink, and it's going to generate methane, CH4. For scrubbing CO2, and here's a molecule of CO2 right here, we have to take one of those and combine it with 4 hydrogen, and when we do that, we're going to get this methane right here in the middle, CH4, and then the extra hydrogen over here will split off and take up that oxygen, and that will create 1 molecule of water. We do that again over here, molecule of water, and that gets rid of the C, and the O2 turns into water. That methane will need to go into another temporary storage tank. So coming back down here, we have the Sabatier. And looking right here, you can see that we have scrubbed all the CO2 out of the air, but now we have been left with methane that we need to deal with. More waste, but we got some more water back. And last, let's deal with the methane. Getting rid of that methane, we have the CH4 that we simply heat up, and that separates the hydrogen from it, and it turns back into hydrogen molecules, and the carbon comes off as waste. So we go up here and we take that methane and some charge and we run that through the pyrolyzer, and out comes waste and hydrogen. The hydrogen will replenish what we used in the Sabatier and even leave a little extra left over. It'll get rid of all of that methane, which is now leaving us with just that little bit of hydrogen left over, a lot of waste from this whole column, continually adding more waste to the whole process. And over here, the food and the water didn't change. So to finish off, you can see the final results right here. The grams per day of food is 1,729, grams per day of water, 935. It's going to generate 2645 grams of waste per day, and we'll actually have 19 grams of hydrogen left over, which is essentially waste. We can vent that into space though. And then over here, I have created a couple charts. One for the food, one for the water, so that I know for how many Kerbals I'm doing and how many days I'm going. This is how many tons of that resource I'm going to need. And since we're going to be going to Duna for who knows how long, I have enough for a 3-year stay column right here, 1,000 days worth for 10 Kerbals, and that's how many are going. So we'll need about 19 tons of food and a little over 10 tons of water. And if we bring all that, we should have more than enough. When you add on top of that we'll be making some of this stuff when we're there. We might be able to drill water out of the ground, and we might be able to grow some food. We won't be drilling water out of the moon, though. That place is pretty barren dry. Maybe if it were Minmus, maybe there would be some ice that we could collect there to turn into water. But the moon, no go. So we have to launch that payload that I was sort of showing a moment ago when I was describing how the life support systems would work. Launch that payload, get it over to the moon, and then Svetlana can go. It also just so happens that we're getting close to the time frame that Hadfield was reported to supposedly be coming back. His wormhole's going to open up and he'll pop out just like he did a while ago. And we're going to want to be there at that same time. So Svetlana's actually timing her launch so that she can meet up with the wormhole of Hadfield at the same time, and then the two of them can go down to the moon together. So that means we're going to need to have double the life support that we would normally send if it were just going to be Svetlana alone. So far, so good on our trip. The boosters have separated. No explosions yet. I mention that because this actually isn't a simulation launch. This is the very first launch, and I was just going for it. Let's go for a legitimate launch. There are no Kerbals on board. And we're using a reliable first and second stage that's been used many times before. The only thing we might have to worry about is the payload, but it's a pretty simplistic looking payload. It's 2 stages with some extra drop tanks that we can get rid of once we're starting to deorbit over at the moon to go in for our landing. We had a little bit of spin during our launch, I'm sure you saw that, but it stopped as soon as the boosters were decoupled, so it's making me think there was something up with those. Now, away goes the fairing. There's our payload. It has a few modifications since I took that short video of it to show you during the life support tutorial / explanation that I was doing earlier. Nothing too major, just antenna and CPUs and extra fuel, various things like that that would be associated with my checklist. As I was going through the checklist that I always use, I noticed a few things were missing, so I threw them on, but it wasn't really that much. Tossed a bunch of extra struts down on the payload to attach it to make sure it's nice and secure to that orbital injection stage we can see burning away right there as well. The one burning right now will put us into our low orbit and later get us started toward the moon. We'll decouple that, and then we have the smaller one in between right under the payload. That one's going to finish off the burn to the moon and then later do the retro capture maneuver. And if there's anything left over after that, which I believe there should be, we will also use it in order to start our landing sequence. We'll decouple it where it can go down and hit the moon and be destroyed that way. This one's just about out, so we'll decouple it now. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh, that's not good at all. Okay, I guess we're going back down and launching another one. After some modifications to find out what went wrong, we'll do some simulations this time around. Hopefully this doesn't set us back too much. There just isn't enough fuel to be throwing it around willy-nilly on these launches without simulations. I should have known better. Wait, hold on a second here. I'm not seeing any damage to the payload itself. The engine looks intact. All the stuff along the sides looks like it might be intact. Maybe it was just that injection stage and the capture stage that we lost, in which case, I'm just going to keep on going. Take a look around the outside here, keep that engine going, see if I see any damage, and I'm not really seeing any. We're just going to go. We're going to go for it anyway. We're not going to be able to land when we get there, but we can figure that problem out later. At the very least, we can get there and make a capture orbit. Although what I'm going to have to do for this probably, because this is a much weaker engine than I had anticipated using at this stage of my trip, I'm going to go just a little ways, maybe about 250 Delta V, and then head out around the planet here, Kerbin, come back around, and when I come to my periapsis again, I will have only spent less than half of what it takes to get to the moon, far less than half, and therefore we can make a second burn that will gain a benefit from the Oberth effect by traveling much faster through that periapsis than we would be if we kept this burn going the entire time right now, because it's just not fast enough to make that burst to get us in the moon before we're going to be pretty far away from the periapsis that's falling behind us now, right now anyway. It may not look like we've gone very far away from the planet right there, but a large portion of our Delta V was spent to get just that little bit of boost because of that Oberth effect. And with the moon coming over the horizon, it's time to make that second maneuver and burn the rest of the way. I will try to get my intercept as close to the surface of the moon as possible. That way I'll be going really, really fast when I get there, and once again take into account the Oberth effect to improve my efficiency. You know, I was telling my son about the Oberth effect the other day, and he was curious how it worked, and I told him, think about a rocket on the ground clamped down, and if you fire the engines, the energy has to go somewhere, and there's exhaust coming out, so the energy goes into the exhaust, and none goes into the rocket, and it stays right there on the ground because it's clamped down. Now let the rocket start moving, and some energy will go into the rocket, but most is still going into the exhaust. So we're not very efficient at the ground, and even less so because the atmosphere is holding in the exhaust. But that's a different story altogether about ISP. Anyway, now we're moving the rocket faster and faster. The exhaust wants to come out at a certain velocity, and as the rocket approaches the speed of the exhaust itself, the exhaust starts getting more or less dropped off rather than pushed out. Since very little energy is now going into the exhaust to move it away from the rocket, since it's only getting dropped off, and since there's a thing called conservation of energy, the kinetic energy has to go somewhere. So it goes into the rocket itself. And so now the faster you're going, the more kinetic energy you get from expelling exhaust. Next up, oh, wait a second. Are we seriously at almost 40 minutes on this episode? Where does the time go? Oh my gosh. I had so many different things I wanted to do. There's getting this lander down to the surface, which now I have to send another mission that's going to refuel it somehow. Svetlana has to go up there and do all the assembly of the base. We need to rescue Hadfield. We need to check in with Bill. We have a satellite that's going to Eve to try and find out what the anomalies are doing. We have more information we need to find out about the other dimension. I need to start building my interplanetary ship that is going to get everybody to Duna. There's another module that needs to go on the space station. The Juul satellite needs to return and be captured. We have to get a device installed on the moon that will do the warping through a miniature wormhole of fuel directly into our tanks back at Kerbin. I was even thinking that I could do something with an asteroid. Where has the time gone? Alright, well, I guess we'll have to get to some of that next time. Until then, I will see you later, Kerbinauts.
elevator. Stop the countdown. Computer. Start launch song playlist. Svetlana 1. That's better. Proceed with the countdown.